Hey everybody, I'm Pippin, and I make games. And I'm here to talk about the sort of specific collaboration that I had with sort of the world of performance art, and this artist called Mariana Abramovic, and what came out of that. And it's really weird, and I'm really sorry about that. So in 2011, I made this game called The Artist is Present, where you queue up for hours and hours and hours at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City to sit in a chair opposite a woman in a red dress, like that. And it's based on a completely real artwork by this artist called Mariana Abramovic. She did it in 2010, and she sat in this chair for several months every day for the opening hours of the museum, and people could look into her eyes for as long as they wanted to, if they queued up. And the game version was really quite popular for a while, and it even got some traction in the art world, but I never heard from her, the woman in the red dress. And then last year, while I was in Canada, I got this email, and it said, "Hello from Mariana Abramovic." And I was like, wow, okay. And she even said that she had played my game, but she got kicked out of the queue because she went and made lunch. And it's probably for the best, right? Because who knows what would have happened if she had sat and looked into her own eyes. Anyway, she wanted to collaborate on some game projects with me, and I said, sounds good. So one of the projects was to create a game version of this institute that she's making in upstate New York in a town called Hudson. And it's called the Marina Abramovic Institute, or MAI. And at this institute, what you do is you do these various exercises that she's designed and that she does herself all the time that help you to appreciate long durational performance art, which is performance art that lasts for 2 hours or more. And so these exercises are all about kind of building up focus and attention and sort of being able to appreciate and withstand that kind of art. And at the end of the exercises, you then watch a performance in this specially designed space, and you kind of leverage the various skills and insights that you gained during the exercises to appreciate the artwork. And so the game was meant to kind of somehow convey all of this, somehow. Even though the project was in some ways a collaboration between me as a person and Mariana Abramovic as a person, the central focus of the collaboration was really the institute itself, and the idea that it could somehow exist both as a place, in upstate New York and also as a place on the internet. And so it was very much a collaboration between the digital and the physical. And so what I want to do for the rest of the talk, basically, is take you on a quick tour of some of the parts of the Institute and talk about some of the things that I thought was interesting about what happened, about games and art, the digital and the physical, some design challenges, some tensions, and some results. So the digital MAI is made in the Sierra, kind of old school 90s Sierra AGI style. And this actually had these, quite big implications from the very beginning. So it's an 80 by 60 resolution, so quite low resolution game. And notably, this changes things like the ways that you can represent scenes, the size of the characters, the detail of the animations that you can have, and it all affects how realistic you can be in the game. So the Institute here is way, way smaller than, the way the real thing is going to be later on this year. But I think that was actually really beneficial to the collaboration because it really forced me to look beyond any idea of realistic recreation of this Institute and to think more about the kinds of experiences that people were meant to have there. For instance, the smallness of the Institute here, I think, actually manages to capture some of the intimacy of the experience, which is something that Marina was really interested in bringing out. Once you're inside the Institute, it starts to get serious. You have to commit to the world of the game and the experiences that it offers you. And in fact, at the very beginning, you sign a contract in the game saying that you'll stay for an hour. And one way that you kind of get locked into this is that you can't leave rooms until the exercise is finished. And the way that that's done is that there's, this classic video game trope of screen wrap. So you can try to leave, but the space is kind of looped and you end up back where you started again. And things like this really help to kind of emphasize the digitalness and the kind of gaminess of this Institute, and also serves a very sort of functional purpose as well. So I liked that idea that, game mechanics can interact with the sort of world of performance art in these kinds of ways. The really big commitment in the game, though, is that you have to hold down the shift key the entire time that you're there, or you fall asleep. Like this. And if you fall asleep, then you miss the rest of the game, basically. You wake up an hour later, dazed and confused, and you've missed everything. And this is to prove that you're kind of awake and attentive to what the game is doing, that you're not just paying attention, but that you're physically present, and you're actually physically connected to the game by your finger on a key. So in one sense, you're kind of being held hostage, right? But in another sense, it's totally reasonable. You signed this digital contract. You agreed to be part of this experience, and you kind of have to agree to be part of the experience in this way for it to work at all. And this idea of not being afraid to ask for or even demand this kind of engagement from a player, I think, is a great thing that can come from contemporary art practice especially. You just have to do it. The player has to join in. Because the exercises are very much about physical actions and paying attention to them, it was really important to translate these kinds of things into the digital version. And this actually felt like a really big responsibility to me, because these exercises are really, really central to Marina Abramovic's practice. This is kind of who she is, in a sense. And so to put them into a game, this was really important that I get this kind of right. But you're dealing with sort of mapping physical and spiritual elements into a game world that maybe, has kind of low inherent physicality and spirituality, right? It's a laptop or, a keyboard and a screen kind of thing, not very spiritual necessarily. So a big part of the game design was kind of working out interactions that might play up the real exercises and kind of evoke the same kinds of ideas. The first exercise that you do is you have to walk in slow motion up a ramp, like that. And one solution to this, of course, and like kind of the good, accessible solution would be that you hold down the right arrow key and the avatar walks in slow motion up the ramp. But that doesn't really work, because that would completely defeat the purpose of the exercise, right? Which is that you're supposed to be paying attention to what you're doing. So we ended up with the sort of simplest idea, which is that to represent slow motion, you have to have slow input. And because we didn't have analog input for this game, it was a keyboard, you have to have sort of sporadic input. So you sort of click the key, and each time you click, the animation advances one frame, and that's how you move. You just sort of try not to move too fast, basically. And what's interesting about this is that these aren't only really questions about sort of usability or game design. These are questions about artistic integrity and player integrity, maybe most importantly. This need to emphasize agency and responsibility as part of what the Institute itself represents. So in the exercise, for example, because we did it this way, the player is being encouraged to sort of be aware of their finger pressing the key for a sort of bodily awareness, and also to watch this gradual advancing of the walk cycle of this animation as a kind of awareness of their digital body. At a certain point in development, I ran into this problem. One thing that you see a lot of in this institute are crystals. So there's crystals embedded in chairs, embedded in beds, pointing at your head, embedded in the walls. And they're there because of their magical powers. And this actually caused me a brief crisis, because I don't really believe in the New Age crystals thing at all. I'm quite skeptical. And it felt really weird to think that I was going to make a game and put it out there that's like, yay crystals. And so I actually had a serious crisis about this. This was like a week of feeling stressed out. And I actually avoided I didn't want to have this particular room in the game at all, because it's all crystals. It's about crystal magic. But then I had this great realization, which is that the crystals in the game don't actually have to do anything. Your avatar walks in front of them, they press their avatar forehead onto the rose quartz crystal embedded into the wall, and nothing happens. You don't float into the sky, you don't glow, there's no angelic choir playing. But this can be read however the player wants, right? It's not saying nothing happens, it's just saying, maybe the player can think that the avatar has been rejuvenated, maybe the player themselves feels rejuvenated by this experience, or maybe nothing. The game doesn't say. And these kinds of ambiguities, I think, are really, really pleasing in a game. And importantly, they allow for collaborations like this across differences of philosophy. And instead, they put the power of interpretation into the hands of the player, which is maybe where it should be a lot of the time. At the end of the experience, you watch a long durational performance. And this artist, Lindsay Pessinger, agreed to have, so this is a real performance, she agreed to have it put into the game as a digital version. And so in this piece, which is called In the Field, she climbs a ladder naked over and over again, up the ladder, down the other side, up the ladder, down the other side, for a number of hours. It's a long durational piece. And so it's sort of about physical endurance, about her being naked, and whether that's kind of powerful or vulnerable or both, about the metaphor of climbing and descending a ladder. All of these sorts of things are in that original piece. But it's a bit different in the digital game, right? So what does it mean for a sprite to be naked as opposed to clothed? It's just different colored pixels. Does the sprite seem more vulnerable or empowered because it's naked? Are those 4 black pixels pubic hair, or are they like a censorship thing, preventing you seeing pubic hair? And what would the difference be exactly? More ambiguity, it's sort of so that's a good thing. What does this idea of physical endurance, which the piece is obviously at least partly about, mean to a sprite sheet that can repeat this animation indefinitely? It will never stop, it will never get tired, it doesn't even sweat. So the computer kind of renders this perfect version of the performance, right? One that cannot end, but it's also a totally flawed version of the performance. It's inhuman, it doesn't contain any human suffering or determination or any of the things that make the piece what it is. And so it really draws out those tensions again between something that's very digital and something that's very physical. Not everybody liked the digital Marina Abramovic Institute. Some people found it a little less than satisfying, and that's totally okay, of course. I mean, I would hardly expect everyone to have been like, yes, I want to do this is awesome. But what is interesting is that we did give people the opportunity to give feedback, and we got all this amazing feedback where people went into this room at the end of the experience, and they sat down, and they started, they wrote about what kind of experience they had, and I feel sad that I quoted Dirty Dancing song, like, it sort of makes it all seem a bit too lighthearted, but what was amazing is that the people who did fill this out, and there were many, many people who did, who had obviously actually finished the game, the sorts of things they said were really amazing, and so I just wanted to show you a couple. I craved the relaxation and thought my character was able to feel throughout the game. However, I wish it would have gone on longer. I want more thought, more relaxation, more feeling. So that's pretty amazing. They wanted this to go on longer, right? Like, they wanted more of this kind of very simple exercising in this digital game, holding down the shift key, tapping the right arrow key, these sorts of things. So quite surprising. More surprising, before I started, I was struggling with the signs of my clinical depression and couldn't bring myself to get up and clean my apartment because I was so physically, emotionally, and mentally drained, but now I actually feel focused and motivated. I'm a little surprised, to be honest. Like, I would never have thought that this kind of game could have this kind of effect on somebody. And it really helped me to see that this, the digital MAI wasn't just this collaboration between me and a famous performance artist kind of person, or between the digital and the physical as kind of conceptual ideas, but very much a collaboration with an audience, and especially those people who are kind of willing to get something out of it. And they were so willing, and they did get something powerful out of it. So the collaboration to build the digital MAI touched on a lot of things that surprised me. Weird tensions and correspondences between physical and digital activities, game mechanics and performance art, ways to cope with crystal magic, and a group of players who really surpassed all expectation in getting something deep and meaningful out of an 80 by 60 resolution video game. As a final note, early in the process of making this game, we moved from calling it the virtual Marina Abramovic Institute to calling it the digital Marina Abramovic Institute, to avoid these connotations of the digital version being kind of fake or lesser or not real in some way, and rather to emphasize that it is the Institute, just in a different medium. And in fact, one weird thing about this whole project, actually, is that the physical Institute doesn't exist yet. There's just a shell of a building that they're working on. So until they actually build that, this is the only real Institute that there actually is. Go figure. Thanks very much.